So, welcome back to part two, as we kind of break apart this two-way street of information with the nature of using the approaches. Pun very much intended, because they can be nurtured just as easily as adopted nature into us. So the easiest way for me to kind of get across the explanation of the cause and effect of all use of approaches in a scenario is, I have to have a lot of difficult conversations with people as a part of my investigative work. It's never in a station setting. It's always in an office or some kind of formal corporate establishment. That way, still difficult, still unpleasant, potentially conversations, but the setting kind of speaks towards your literal approach that you use in that situation. Now, physically, I am 6'1", 260, and covered in tattoos. Now, if I have to go and have a conversation with somebody who is not used to being around that kind of a person, not that I would necessarily be imposing, just that they're not used to being around somebody like that, the nature is that there might be an immediate increase of stress levels, immediately push them towards a notion of whatever their desired approach is in that particular scenario. So when it comes to how we've been looking at using these for de-escalation practices, and with the people that we've worked with so far, we've had a great deal of success. One of the topics that very often doesn't get spoken about as much, we feel, is the way that you can apply them to yourself initially, right? That's training that you can do anytime, any place, anywhere, because just as the 12 approaches will be connected towards all people, correct me if I'm wrong, viewers in the metasphere, you guys are people as well. We are people too, so they will affect us in the same way. So we can understand this journey of information. And I certainly know that when I go into some particular establishments that are a little more higher brow than I'm used to, most of the time my left hand stays in my pocket, out of the way, because that's usually the first thing to set people on edge. Oh my God, a painted man, like from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves or something. He tends to set the people on edge, and I manage my approach accordingly through uses of blend, through uses of flow. If the situation requires it, I maybe even push the time into a shapeshift, right? Well, more on these specific terms as we push this out. But gentlemen, the duality of data within this field, what are we looking at as it applies to ourselves?
Um, I think I want to presence that this is rather sensitive, and the reason I say that is because it's much easier to analyze others. It's much easier to use 12 approaches, profiling tactics, and all the rest of this stuff to notice things about other people. But when we start to actually turn the mirror on ourselves, it at least it's been my experience that it causes us to have to look at depths of our own journey, and ways we were raised, and candidly traumas that we experienced, and betrayals, neglect, abandonment, abuse, these kinds of really sensitive topics. And so I think I wanted to start by saying that it takes a lot of courage
Yeah,
to and a lot of strength and a lot of resilience and a lot of compassion
hell yeah.
to be able to even sit with oneself around these things. And I know that because it's still hard for me to do it. And I help create this, well, not create, discover it. Okay. And then categorize or label it. And so for anybody listening, I just wanted to say, I see you. Okay. I know what it's like. I still look at this stuff inside of myself every day. And so I think the thing that I want to bring up is how important it is to do this, because the filter by which we look inside of ourselves, it becomes the filter by which we look at the world around us. And whatever emotional qualities become activated in us as we're approaching navigating any situation or setting colors the way we reason. that reality. And obviously, please feel free to watch all the videos with Jim and Ben on biases, fallacies, and priming, and all the rest of the stuff that comes in when it comes to neuroscience about how that actually works. Okay, but that if we don't look at ourselves, we may be looking at the world through rose-colored lenses, and so we may be assessing the approaches of others without looking at all data objectively, or as objective as we possibly could. Okay? And thus passing judgment about a moment really from being trapped inside of a hall of mirrors. And so that's one of the thing I want to bring up the most is more of a warning,
Yeah.
a disclaimer that wherever you're willing to go or not go in the 12 approaches based on your own life experiences will color the way that you see not just the moment you're a part of in that space, but also the flexibility you may need to alter the approach of another, and by altering your own. So that's, I think, the biggest, most important thing to me as I was listening to you speak about it, Ben.
Great. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Jim, how about you?
I mean, I like where you took this, JD, because I agree with you, like every step of that. And someone that has had to go through that, right? Traumas, micro traumas, everything we go through, the hardest, most difficult thing we can ever do is point the finger at ourselves. And we need to be able to do that and understand one, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's gonna hurt. It's not pretty because this is stuff that we have repressed and have done with. And you're 1,000% right because I see it with different people I spoke to, family members I care about, that everyone is on their own journey here. But we're really only going to get out of it what we're willing to put into it. And you really can't shortcut this kind of stuff. If you're really going to read things like the approaches here and really get something out of it, and when we're saying, hey, you got to turn inward, you really have to do that. It's not just the kind of scrape, and when it gets a little uncomfortable, we stop, because a key thing that you hit on is, we get into Carl Jung's and the archetypes, right? We talk about the shadow, we talk about persona in general, which is Latin for mask, and you hear it all the time. All these behavior people talk about people masking and putting masks on, impression management. My interpretation, that is people that haven't done the internal work to get uncomfortable and then get the feeling of being comfortable after that and actually heal and start to work on that healing process and that growth we're at, to where you can just be comfortable in your own skin, be who you are. And then you don't really have to worry about that. What you have is, at least in my interpretation of it and what I've seen, is that people that have just only gone like a layer deep or just surface layer and it gets tough, they will tell themselves certain things and it wasn't so bad, and then they start refabricating or creating and weaving this, and then they start reestablishing a separate identity that really is off the mark of where they're at. And the further we get off center and the more we do that and go around and do the work, next thing you know, we're way over here and we're way offline, off our Olympic being we're at, and now we're establishing this, and this is where our perspective, and this is where we figure we grow, and this is where we believe this to be our authentic self. Well, then, like you said, when we're perceiving or taking in things from the outside world or trying to help, we're not doing anyone any justice because we're not even looking at it from a proper, true lens. Like you said, if you're going to use rose-colored glasses or whatever microscope or thing you want to look at, you're not looking at it. And again, that goes back into the different various biases, right, Ben?
Mm.
Cognitive identity. We're just further clouding our judgment rather than come in. It's okay. I tell you, you're going to come out a different person. You're going to have some ups and downs you're going through in growth, but on the end of this, you come out and emerge differently, but you have a better understanding of who you are and tick, and it allows you to really be that best version for others and yourself. And I don't look at it as judgment. It's like, I love helping people and seeing them. And when I can sit and see someone struggling on their journey, and it's like, hey, here. And like, well, I've done this, because the biggest thing too anymore, everyone loves Stoicism, everyone loves empathy. People will read a Marcus Aurelius quote or an Epictetus quote, and then next thing you know, they tell you that they're out walking around in nature and nothing external bothers me, I'm a Stoic. And then cool, and then the next thing I asked them, well, this is a particular person in journalism. Well, what lessons have you learned? Life isn't about lessons. Okay. What internal work have you done to heal from what it is that you're going through? Crickets. Okay.
Just like that.
So, just like that, crickets. Darn cameras. But it's like, okay, so you're saying this and you're saying you're practicing Stoic and you've done all this, but yet when you're asked a question about the internal work, you don't have an answer because you haven't. Reading a passage in a book that resonates with you or connects with you is a foundational start because it at least gets your mind going and gets you thinking. But the consistency, the discipline, the things to apply or really dive into there and do that work, um, that's that's where there is no secret sauce. You gotta put in the work. There is no shortcuts. You gotta put it in. Um, but that's where the growth comes in, and that's where I think you come out and like, man, this stuff just comes out really great. And I, at least from there, I've gone through and seen my fair share, and each day I'm a better person. Each day I apply something different, and there's always a different thing of there's not a positive and negative in life anymore. It's like, okay, this is the universe has sent me this. What am I got to pull from it? What am I learning from it? What is this allowing me to do? How am I growing? And it's like, bam, like there's nothing there anymore other than like opportunities and growth. Like, and as long as you see opportunities and growth, like that's what it's about. But you're never going to get there if we don't peel these layers back and really go in there. And I tell you, that shadow, boy, it's a mean place. It's a cold, dark basement. It really is, and we can feel alone. But I tell you, when you can sit there and you can be honest and humble, just led to great discussion with family members from like for me on the personal side of an upbringing that was rather rough. And being able, for instances like, forgive my mom. Because we can only understand certain things from a child's perspective when we're in that moment. And it isn't until we get older and go back and realize and go back and go, okay, well, where were they at on their journey? What were they exposed to? What were they experienced to? And the more that I had those conversations and get to say, for instance, have those conversations with my mom, which I now understood the decisions she made, and at the time she was making the best decisions in the moment she could, given the experiences and stuff she had been exposed to. And she's just now, going through parts of this journey and growth on herself, and it's like, man. And she's like, and she looks at me, she's like, how did you start doing this years ago? So I don't know. Maybe it was a survival mechanism that triggered me to do this, or something that triggers us to really go on these journeys and do something arduous and hard, which is our own self work. Um, but just gonna look at it and go, well, you did the best you could, and it's not your fault, and that's okay, and I'm okay,
Mm.
and it's like, man, when you can start having those kind of conversations and do that work, and we're not harboring that resentment, those all that stuff that we used to harbor and fester and we repress and push down, and then we have all these resentments of why we were in these situations or why this relationship didn't go well, and we can just say, you know what, it helped me grow, it made me a better person, and at this particular time, this is where this person was at, and this is where I was at, and this is why there was an area of conflict or whatnot. But once we can establish those points and pain points and heal and grow, I just think it just puts us on the other side. And with that, I'll step back because JD, you really kind of triggered with that going there, and it's like it's a disclaimer, but it is well worth that. It's well worth that journey, and the 12 approaches gets you on the path, and then it's really the internal work after there that individual has to do to get the best results from that.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And thank you for providing so much depth and insight around it. But I also can imagine, like they're listening to me talk, they listen to you talk, and they're thinking to themselves, "Holy crap, what a journey! I don't even know if I want to get started." You know what I mean? Because it can seem vast and big and long.
It's lifelong. It's always
Yeah,
growing.
and
You're
it
always
is,
learning.
but I don't. I want to warn people against thinking about overwhelming themselves at the very beginning,
Mhm.
because then
One
we
one
never get
step at a
started.
time. Yeah,
We
one
never
step
get
at a
started.
time. One
Yeah,
piece at
and
a time.
so I'm wanting to give something to everybody that's listening now that's practical, that's pragmatic. And so what I do is I take the 12. I've taken the 12 approaches out. Okay, and I literally do intensity, frequency, and duration.
Mm.
So I'll take each of the 12 approaches and I put them on a page. Okay, I gotta look at all of them. And I literally did numbers, scale of 1 to 10 on intensity, frequency, and duration, which is how often do I use this approach? How long does that approach last? Okay. And how intense is it to me? And there were some of them that I discovered was almost no frequency, almost no duration, and almost, I don't use them at all. And I was like, oh my God, I don't touch them. Literally, I don't touch them at all. And so I can't shape shift or flow into any of those. And so I want to invite everybody that's listening right now to do just that first step of take the 12 approaches, write them down, and literally just say intensity, frequency, and duration. How often do I do this? How long does it last? And how intense is it when I use this response? Okay. And if you can, think about location. What is a common thread between all the places I use this in? Just to become aware. Okay. Don't do anything else beyond that. It's just, let me just use this as an awareness tool. Like where am I at? Just a quick assessment of self. Like, where am I at with these? Because I can tell you that when you discover that some of these 12 approaches you never, ever touch, ever, if you were just to start implementing a simple practice, and we'll go into those, I'm sure, much more in the future, just some simple practices that you can invite into your life in order to start bringing this approach in, suddenly you have more flexibility. And we're back to what Jim talked about before, which is adaptability. And then suddenly you can discover that there are parts of yourself that you've never let be alive and to live. And with that, expansiveness. Now, for anybody that's listening right now and you want to take it a layer deeper, if you want to do what Jim said and you're really like, hey, man, I'm going for the advanced version. Okay, then what I want you to do is I want you to take out another piece of paper and I want you to put mom on the top of it and another piece of paper and put dad on the top of it. Write the 12 approaches, and I want you to write down intensity, frequency, and duration of each of these 12 approaches for your parents. Okay, and just write those down and see if you guys have any experience like I did, you're going to go, wait a minute. Mine are very similar to my mom and dad's, which is like, dang it. Okay, and so that can help give people something that they can actually do to enter the space without being overwhelmed by the space.
100%. And I would even say you take bits and pieces of the polar, like you're getting at the people, when you're around certain types of people, whether it's a family member, a friend, or certain they're a coworker, do we feel an energy shift? We feel something, there's a dynamic change within this. So there's different things we could feel and how we adjust or adapt ourselves to that. The fight flight kicks in when we're trying to avoid a particular manager. All right, on a particular day of the week, the objects or the environment has been talked about in investigations. I mean, just to getting the journaling aspect of writing things down and how you feel around certain people, particular objects, locations that you're encountering. What are the actions of the people that are doing that may trigger that stuff, and the more we can kind of write down, those are really great tips, JD. I mean, it really comes down to is writing it down and seeing it, because it takes it from that subconscious to the awareness aspect, which gets us back again to the premise of this is the self-discovery work, the self-work. And the more we can bring to the forefront and be conscious of, we can see the paper, we can now start making those actionable steps and plans in order to heal, correct, and allow ourselves to grow, and then truly, as Ben would say, not just see, but observe, right?
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. What a bombshell to end on. Me. No. I mean, it popped into my head how with Epictetus and Stoicism, that in order to protect ourselves, we must live like doctors and be continually treating ourselves with reason. And it's only through applying this kind of reason to our actions in these approaches that we truly understand what it is. And for those who might be thinking, well, what are the 12? What are the 12? They'll be in the information box or the description, wherever it is that this gets shared. They'll be there. Okay? But if you don't have the option to write it down just yet, just consider what your actions are during times of stress. That's it. Whatever you consider to be stress in your role, whether it's, confronting your boss about an impending deadline, or, having a spar with a guy who's 2 feet taller than you at the whatever it is. Stress for you is different to JD, different to me, different to Jim, and so on and so forth. All we want you to do is to just turn that lens back towards yourself, alongside turning it towards other people. It's never about judgment. Nobody's going to say to you, you are weaker or less because of X, Y, and Z. We're not equipped to do that. Nobody is really, in my humble and easily swayed by food opinion. But that's all we're asking you to do is data mine for the way that you react and journey through this stressful process. And with that in mind, we will see you very soon for part 3.